Yeah, I was going to say, since I'm probably actively mixing about 25% of the time. And most of those mixes are things that I've produced, which is a whole nother, I feel like I should bring on a producer who mixes their own stuff, and then we'll just talk about how insane it makes us both the whole time. Because switching from one brain to the other is actually a very specific skill that's kind of hard to do. And it's interesting to hear you talk about this, because I think everybody's instinct, I'll talk about my experience, but I think this holds true for a lot of people, which is when you're creating and making things, as what we said a second ago, that if you don't hear something, your instinct is go, let me turn that up. Or I'm not hearing the vocal enough, let me turn up some mid-range, let me turn up this, that's not bright enough, let me turn up some high end. And what happens if you're producing and you're in the studio and you're just making stuff, that's okay, because you're not really concerned about headroom and how loud the mix is. But when you're in that mixing phase where you're going, how loud is this going to be? Where's my LUFS? How hard is this hitting? Where is it hitting the limiter? That sort of thing. If your instinct is to just boost and boost and boost, you're just going to destroy your headroom immediately. And I do that all the time. I'm working on a project right now that I'm now in more mixing mode of 3 songs that I've produced. And it's drove me sort of insane, because during the creation process, it's this like super aggressive, hyper pop, intense thing. So it's just like, let's jam it into distortion. Let's make it sound crazy. And now I got to make it sound like it's going to sit on a streaming service. And so I have to like put that brain aside and go, okay, things are a little messy in here. Instead of boosting the vocal, let me carve out something let me carve out the mid-range so the vocal speaks in that 8 to 1K. The hi-hats are a little bit too bright. Let me lower them so the vocal can sit above it, or vice versa. Let me switch that. So you really have to, when you're talking about loudness, it becomes really important to turn off the instinct that we all have when starting out and in creation mode, which is boost things, and start thinking about carving and cutting and that sort of thing, so you're not messing up your headroom. There's a really...
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that, because I used to mix everything I produce as well until I doubled down on mixing. And I don't know if I put this into practice. I just thought of it later after I kind of quit producing, like what I would do in this case. Like if I were to ask what you do, I have thoughts on what I would do. I would do the production. When everyone thinks that the production is done, I would commit stems as if I was sending it to Serban to mix. Like if I was producing, maybe I think Serban's the right fit for my record. So I'm going to get it ready for him. Oh, we don't have any time. There's no budget. Guess I'm mixing it today. So therefore, I'm going to make a clean new session in Pro Tools. Like I used to produce in Ableton, so then, and Pro Tools combination. But say I was in Ableton, I would export those stems and then make a clean session with no plugins as if I would send it to someone else. And then I would take a week, if possible, away from that. Now I am not producing. Then the first thing I would do would be lower everything by 6 dB. I would clip gain everything. So all my clips would read -6 dB. And then maybe I would put a limiter or a clipper on that's making up 2 of those, right? And then in maybe 4, depending on what I'm actually going for aggression-wise, what kind of record it is. And then I would put my rough mix, the last production mix that everyone agreed on that sounded tight, and then I would mix from there, A being against my own mix as the rough mix from a week ago. Now, because when I hear people say they're mixing their own productions, have they stepped back from it as the producer, and then now have they turned on Mixed Brain? Have you meditated even in a 20-minute session before? Have you changed tasks? Have you understood that you're moving into another task and then really, really stepped into that role? And I think that's possible. I think you, of all people, I know you can do it, right? So me talking to you...
You can tell with the smile on my face that I have not done this, and I'm about to do this for this project, because this is exactly...
If you can.
I would say if you can.
A week, at least one day, step away from it. Don't do anything to it. If you have an assistant, get them to prep it. If you don't have one, prep it the day before. Like, just step away. All the plugins, you can't access it. I remember when I was working on a project with Andrew Wells, great producer, love Andrew. He told me the minute that he sends a record off to mix, that rough mix, like that's on another hard drive. He doesn't go back. He listens to the mix as if it's this is the version. And he gives notes based on that. He's not A-Bing with his rough the entire time. He knows what the new mix is lacking next to his rough that he just spent weeks
really
on. You know what I mean? Like, that's a new thing. That's how I am with masters. When I send to Dale to master, I don't it's 1 out of 50. I pull my mix up next to it because something's not quite right and I can't really articulate it. It's a new thing now. It has moved down the line, moved down the chain of command. And if you're doing 2 out of the 3 rolls or all 3 of the rolls, you can also do that, but you need time, space, and some mindfulness to separate those rolls.
Yeah, and it's great advice. And of course, it's not always possible to do all of that, but if you can, definitely do it. And the only hiccup in my, just selfishly talking about my current project, is that we're also, as I'm like doing the mixes, I'm also getting some production notes. Sure. So like, hey,
that's okay. You open up that production session.
Yep.
And then you bring that stem back in.
You're saying take the time, spend the time, and don't take shortcuts? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what we always say. Do we have any other advice, actually? We've done like 90 episodes. Have we said anything else but there is no shortcut?
Everything is a version of that. Like, if you want to be the best, just take the time. That's just what it takes.
Okay, when I'm mixing for a producer and there are changes in the production, the way that we stay on track always is when the producer sends back a new stem with the fix from the start of the session every time, as if it was the first time they sent the stem,
replacing whatever stem. Yeah, you just V2 or something.
No confusion. So if you have to do that production note on your own, then you would then go back to the mix session after you assess the production as if you're the producer. And I would argue then you can probably just jump back to the mix session. You don't have to take another week, before going back to that. But if you have the time, I think a week off, 3 days minimum before going into that second space. And then I would say never master your own shit. That's not real.
Yeah, I don't
understand that. Just don't do it.
Thanks for watching. Just a reminder, all of this content is free. There's no secret knowledge here. There's no Patreon. We don't read ads. We don't have sponsors. We're just trying to build a knowledge base. All that we ask in return is that you share it with somebody. Thanks so much.